So we are here to talk about a discussion which we decided to title as follows, and we are calling it An Army of Intelligence Led by a Lion of Trust. So in case you're wondering and saw it on the website, what that means, the inspiration came on a little epiphany moment to me of a proverb that stays in my mind quite often, and you might like it. And the proverb goes like this. It says, an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. Right? An army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. Now, without going into mapping what is a sheep in AI and in trust and all that, the crux of it that we are here to talk about is the idea of trust and how we bring that and the considerations for it into the AI renaissance that everybody is excited about, right? My name is Gurvinder Ahluwalia. I'm the CEO of Digital Twin Labs, previously the CTO for IBM North America. Privileged to be speaking over here. I've given several talks at the MIT Media Lab, and shout out to John Werner and Alex Pentland for putting such a great event together, and of course, for all the audience that has been so committed since 7 a.m. this morning to be here. So thank you so much for everybody to be here. My background is deep and wide in technology, in implementing large enterprise systems, most of them one wave after the other on frontier waves of technology, and taking them into large corporations and into startups. Most recently, I'm stewarding a combination of solutions, a combination of technologies, bringing those into solutions for the next generation of supply chain, next generation of transaction platforms, based on the technologies that we are talking about over here. One pillar of which is AI, the other pillar of which is blockchain and Web3, my other area of expertise, and the third pillar is IoT, and the fourth pillar, pretty much entrenched and pervasive, is cloud. So the work that I do is in deploying those kind of systems for the global trading of diamond, for example, for De Beers, for the global tracking of containers in global trade and shipping, for food tracking, pharma, so on and so forth, mostly for enterprise kind of systems, and then also similar smaller solutions in startups. That's my background. I want to take a moment to hand it over to our esteemed panel over here, Arlene Hart. I'll give it to each of them in just a moment to give more elaboration of their background. Arlene is the VP of AppGate, taking care of security of the world, cybersecurity of the world, and equally importantly, she's the former CISO of FBI. So Arlene, thank you so much for being on the panel and being here at the event. Then we have Shingai. She is the head of AI agents and education at ChainML. Then we have, and she's from Toronto. Shingai, thank you so much for coming from such a far place. By the way, I'm from Dallas, Texas. And Russ Wilcox is the CEO of Architects AI. So let me give it, Arlene, to you to give elaboration of your background, please.
Thank you, Guru. Thank you so much for having me here. This is an exciting day, and I think some of the innovations are really fascinating. I, of course, come from the FBI side of the world, and so I look at the dark side of everything. So, all of these amazing attributes and things like we can see, I've seen people turn them around and use them for bad, and you know this and I know this, but I just wanted to make sure that we highlight that. So in my time at the FBI, of course, I was defending the FBI itself from attacks from nation states often enough, and from random attacks across the board. So I got a very deep understanding of what the attack surface looks like, and then all of the tools that people are willing to use to actually attack the government, individuals. My team protected the information that the FBI got in order to help the rest of the country. and internationally too. So it was really eye-opening when I walked in there. I did not start my life in the FBI. I started and then, did a little bit of government, and then I was a contractor, and then I was a contractor to the FBI. And that's where I was realized, oh, this is a different story. And so it's a smaller thing than DoD kind of space, but it's truly essential to make sure that we know what the attack surface looks like and who's going after us. And that's part of the reason I'm here. One of the pieces that one of the reasons I went to Appgate in particular is because it's a zero trust company. And I don't know, I have not heard zero trust here at all. That's okay. But the whole idea is, if you need to protect something, be aggressive in protecting it and hide it and make sure that you cannot see what it is, that nobody can see your assets except for you when you intentionally do that. But, sort of the other side of the open source question. So they have to work in concert with each other, but that's the story that I bring to the games.
Thank you so much, Arlette. Shingai?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shingai Manjengwa, and I lead AI education at ChainML. I also lead solutions engineering at ChainML. So we're the builders. We leverage large language models and other tools to develop agents, right? Software that's built for AI. So we build these agents that perform a variety of functions. Right now, we're interested in the idea of orchestrating these agents, right? Because if we train them and they specialize on a particular task, that means we can leverage multiple different agents to really supercharge whatever activities we're trying to do in the field of AI. My background, I'm a data scientist. I've been working in the space for many years now. I got into education because people kept asking me, we like the model, but how did you do it? And then a series of coincidences, I ended up starting a company called Fireside Analytics that was doing data science education. And over 500,000 people have taken my courses online. You'll find my work on Coursera. There's a data science course that I did with IBM there. So, we're at the heart of really leveraging the tools and the techniques. And we find ourselves, also thinking about, we're excited about open source. The idea of using open source models is compelling to us. But we do also see that there is a dark side. So this is a fantastic conversation for us to be involved in. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Russ Wilcox. I am CEO of Artifacts AI, where we are revolutionizing how policy is drafted. We have large language models and agents that will go to local municipalities, aggregate that information, and try to provide a history of how policy has developed over time and how that data can be used to have accountable, transparent future policies in the making. A little bit background of myself before I formed Artifacts AI. I was director of data science for a large corporate environment and served as a consultant for most of my career, building out large language models back in 2011, 2012 before they got cool. And so one thing that highlighted my career was using machine learning and now AI to pitch that little corporate revenue dial up and up and up. And I started to see a bifurcation in the economy where we started to realize that we need to democratize data science and we need to start using AI, not just for the large FANG companies, but for the good as of society. And that's when I saw an opportunity within the municipal space to start leveraging that. And as soon as getting into that, I realized that, wow, there is a complete black box of information with how these policies are developed. There's a lack of visibility into how any policy is made. And more importantly, now that we're living through the AI revolution, how is equitable policy going to be made in AI so that it's trustworthy, so that it's ethically viable, but it also spurs innovation? So in addition to that, for my professional life, I've been a speaker. I've done 2 TEDx talks. I was featured at the World Economic Forum on this idea of building democratized AI, and I'm glad to be part of this panel and contribute in terms of some of the experiences that I've had working with both state and federal policymakers in terms of making AI policy equitable for everyone.
Thank you, and welcome again, Russ. We'll hear more from Russ, particularly on the policy aspects. We'll dive into each of these areas. We'll hear more from Shingai on orchestration and what it's going to take with agents, especially in the face of proliferation of multimodal and multipolar and open and closed models, right? So there's a lot to do there. But for now, I'll turn our attention to Arlette to step us a little bit through. By the way, let me, I don't know if this is working. Thank you so much. So one of the things I just wanted to set the stage a little bit on is when we're talking about trust, it means so many things, and it's a whole world that everybody will have a different interpretation of it. In fact, I've already heard from some of the folks at MIT, at the Media Labs over here, they prefer to use the word reliability. But this is an area and a science that is developing. The science of the inverse of trust is actually very well developed, and that is risk. Risk is very well developed into a science. But the measurement of trust is not very, very good. Whole separate discussion. But for now, there are a lot of elements, and you've heard about identity. In fact, on the stage over here a couple of hours ago, somebody was talking about trust in my laptop in its ability, based on its ability to do, auto-completion, right? If it doesn't do it very well, and I become a slave to it, I don't trust that machine. I don't trust that system. So that is another dimension of trust as well, right? But the ones that we will focus on are really the expertise set that is represented over here. I will speak in a later iteration on trust based on provenance. We've heard the word extensively here at the Media Lab today and even otherwise. Of course, cyber is represented by Arlette, and AI agents and policy by our other two panelists. So turning our attention, Arlette, sorry, I interrupted the flow over there. So if we look at, and maybe we could pick a contemporary incident that is happening with the Palo Alto networks, right? So I don't know how many of you know. I'll actually give it to Arlette to describe it, and then given that situation on the attack that has happened right now on firewalls, quite pervasively, and that is still going on, by the way. What role can a future of AI play in cybersecurity?
So there's so many roles that AI can play in the world of cybersecurity. But let's first set out what the problem is. And the problem is that historically, all of our IT as we know it right now is built on, the internet and the DARPA kind of the DARPA net that was created, and then the internet that was built after that. But DARPA net was never meant to be secure. It was meant to be an interchange for scientists, and a very narrow one, as we heard earlier today. When it turned into a wide infrastructure that was available to everybody, the security part of it was not even in the mix at all. So that part came much later and has been catching up ever since. So when you look at things like secure coding practices, those are relatively new or not well adopted. The secure infrastructure, how well is your infrastructure locked down? How are your firewall rules? Those things, I don't know how many of you read firewall rules regularly. They're not that fun, they're not that interesting, and they're very long and complex. And so it's okay, how do you make sense of those things? But these are the places that we rely on to make sure that the data that we want to be kept private is indeed kept private. I know this is an AI world, we don't care about those things, right? It's infrastructure, that's infrastructure stuff. It's important, and it's one of the things that AI can do, and we're working on these pieces too, and we're using AI to do it, is identify what your firewall rules can be, identify whether they are doing what they are doing, whether they are actually being used effectively, can you get rid of things, block everything. That's, my company does that. But really making sure that not only is the information available to you, but it is accurate. Only the people who are allowed to make the changes to the information or the algorithm, whatever piece of it is, are making the changes, and that the data itself is coming from the right provenance so that you can actually verify the provenance of the data. Not only that it has the right provenance, but that you know that it has the right provenance. This is a big piece of cybersecurity. I'm not trying to lock everything down so that there's nothing there, but we do want to make sure that what is coming out is actually accurate. Other sides of the problem. Not everybody, we've had this conversation about healthcare and things like that. It's oh yeah, you can have your own, AI doctor. What if your AI doctor is compromised and your AI doctor does damaging things to you? There are absolutely cases where we know this happens, right? And you've read them, they're out there in the news. These are areas that become risk. So when we're talking about, do you trust it? How much do you trust it, and why do you trust it, and how much can you trust it? And those are pieces that we really have to tackle. It's not enough to say, don't worry about this, the experts have it. People have to be able to build their trust. It's one of the pieces that, one of the risks of will AI succeed is based on, do people trust the technology? And we have to that requires conversations with people, that requires us to build the trust within the society that says, here's why it is trustworthy, and here's who can trust it. And I mean, these are just the starting points. Remember, there's criminals out there. There are bad people out there who do bad things. People steal money through the Bitcoin, through every bank is under attack constantly, through fraud, through all of the rest of the above. These are constant attack vectors. This is where I pay attention to things. I know you know that, and it's really exciting space that we're in the AI world. We just have to make sure that we have the basics down pat, and then we can build from there.
So the cybersecurity aspect is cross-cutting, and Arlene, if I get your point, the new infrastructure that everyone is pushing is going to take new measures of cybersecurity as well, while at the same time we have challenges for the existing infrastructure. So if we turn our attention, Shingai, to you, how do you take this to the field, right? So cybersecurity is going to cut through provenance that I'll speak to later. It's going to cut through how policy is going to be affected, and vice versa, that Russ will talk about later. But how do we take this to the field, especially with the orchestration and flows that you are going after in a multimodal AI world?
So one of the challenges that we have is that the space is moving incredibly quickly. And we have people that are trained in cybersecurity, and our traditional organizations have those functions inbuilt. But many of the players in AI right now are startups that are lean and are building, and we're trying to get our products out there. So there is a challenge right now in terms of how do we put some guardrails and control and try and protect the tools that we're building. We've had instances of agents being compromised. Code injection is one of the things that we talk about a lot, where somebody can enter some code into your chatbot. They can actually start to change a system. They can acquire information. There are many things that they could probably do. The key thing there is that many of the practitioners right now don't have the knowledge to really try and address that. So the first thing that I would say is, in the field, we really just need to educate, right? And it's educating high-level practitioners, not, we talk about AI literacy, that's one level, but it's really bringing together the fields of cybersecurity and machine learning to make sure that we are educating our practitioners to be able to address these key issues in machine learning. Right. And then the second thing that I would say is there are some technological solutions that we're starting to explore that could be helpful. You mentioned Bitcoin, and Web3 has a trust issue of its own, but we do have blockchain technologies that could be leveraged to be able to try and address who is using the data, what data is being used in an agent, what is the agent being used for, and potentially pay someone for the use of their agent. So many people are starting to explore that as a potential solution for how we might have increased trust in this AI world where we're using agents and we're doing agent orchestration. By no means perfect at this point. It is exploratory, and I have to say time will tell.
Yeah. Thank you, Shingai. Let's come to Russ. Russ, I was listening to the pitch about hacking policy creation, right? Like, how do you hack it? And I mean that in a positive way. And in fact, the Harvard Kennedy School had me as a judge a few years ago, where they actually ran a hackathon. And that hackathon was, a policy-thon, inspired by the paradigm and mindset of a hackathon, generate policies. In fact, I think Daza Greenwood, another shout out to him, the expert in computational law here at Media Labs, he had a similar policy-thon kind of a thing over here as well. So how can AI, is Congress going to be out of business?
No. So I think this is where we have to step back and first say that AI is not magic, right? And we have to get through that through our head. Throughout the development of technologies throughout human society, we've always had technologies that we could grasp, right? Think about the printing press. There wasn't substantive mathematical formalism around that, right? We're in a new area now where some of this is mystical, some of it's magical with this generative AI, but we have to remember that there's technical expertise that goes into what is essentially very complicated probabilistic models. Now, from a policy standpoint, I think generative AI allows us to actually improve how we write policy. Think about all of the variations that are generated around, say, the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the different types of legalese that goes into it, where people might have different interpretations. There's no easy way to track that accountability. There's no easy way to track that visibility. And how do you judge whether a policy has been successful? So AI, especially from an information retrieval standpoint, will allow us to supercharge how we create that policy. How do we create equitable housing policies? How do we create equitable entrepreneurial policies or climate policies? That can now be ingrained and developed in data that has not been previously accessible. However, there is a double-edged sword there, right? Because again, this is a new technology that has mathematical formalism behind it. So when we're developing policy around AI, we have to remember we can't use vague terms that sometimes pop up in other policy statutes. We know that oftentimes in the legal community, words are very precise for a reason, right? The word shall has a very precise legal meaning. Now, when we have folks from the non-technical side creating AI policy, I get concerned around overbroad terms that can inhibit innovation, right? We need to be grounded in ethical AI. We need to have data governance. We need to understand a breadcrumb trail of what was trained on, where there's certain attack vectors entering into these models, what weights were used. But if we start throwing around terms like traditional AI or trying to cap that in terms of something that might be legally understandable, it has drastic technical meanings that could inhibit certain innovations. So we have to realize that there's a double-edged sword we're talking about with AI and policy. One is that it can supercharge how we create data-driven policy for the betterment of society. But also, when we're drafting AI policy, we have to think about it very differently, because this is grounded in mathematical formalism that has technical meanings, that has definitions that need to be reflected in that policy that is written.
Thank you, Russ. We'll come back probably in another quick cycle. I'll just kind of try to tackle the topic of provenance that I promised. So I'll get out of my moderator role for a moment and speak directly to the group over here. Of course, all of you are welcome to chime into any of this that you like. So when I look at kind of the future and even what's happening right now, I never look at it as an individual technology. One technology is not going to serve the solution. So the solution has to be a composite of technology, and in fact, it has to be a composite of the legacy systems. But when we put in new infrastructure, it's going to ripple change all over the ocean. So we have to address those technology changes, those financial changes, and those labor and organizational changes as well. So if the diagram sort of speaks to itself, let me just give you a little bit of voiceover in case it doesn't speak to itself. You have, and we are looking at not just data centers. I think there's a decentralized AI station or a demo somewhere downstairs. Even I'm looking for it. We've got to be able to also push it out from the data center out to the edges, it's already there in autonomous driving. And then what is coming out of that is data. I'm working from the bottom up over here. What is coming out of that is data, probably untrusted data. And of course, raw data, and you go through your ETL and massaging and cleaning and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole different thing. How do you get that data? What are the incentives for other parties to share that data? That's a whole separate discussion, right? And so if we look at now how to do this, if you run this data, clean it up, and then run it through a consensus algorithm. For those of you who are from the Web3 kind of a world, might be thinking this is blockchain, and yes, it could very well be blockchain, but that's not what I'm shoehorning the trust for AI solution into. And the reason I'm not shoehorning that is, yes, consensus algorithms have become popularized in the last 10, 15 years because of blockchain, but consensus algorithms have been around for decades. So it's not a new phenomenon. Consensus algorithms are used in code version checking systems, so there's no race condition between developers that are checking in code. More than that, the plane that you flew in on, jet engines use consensus algorithms so that the engine as a whole knows its state in a trusted manner, even if there are 2,000 parts and components, individual components that are in it. So the pattern is still the same, where you're dealing with a corpus of data coming from different sources, and you have to establish singularity in truth of that data. That's what moves it into readiness through the provenance layer, which is why we called it a lion, and then feeds into an army of intelligence, which is, as we've been hearing on other stages over here at the event, which is increasingly getting commoditized and decentralized and distributed, right? It's getting unleashed. And then that feeds into applications that are whatever your favorite. I picked the ones that I worked on, not necessarily customer service. We've heard about it quite a bit, but supply chain, assistance, education, and so on and so forth. Let's take a quick round. Last round, we do have, I was allowed to go a few minutes over, so it's okay. We'll wrap it up in a couple. So Arlette, back to you. What are the main takeaways and what are the main challenge or kind of call for action you want to leave with the group?
So when I see this picture, I see something that has no boundaries around it. And that's one of the pieces that concerns me, because it's like, who is allowed to access what in what space becomes one of the grand questions. You know, it's like, is this an organization? Is this a company? Is it government? Do you want government having these things? A few years ago, people were mostly concerned about government accessing data inappropriately, and now we look at like some large organizations that have been accessing data in ways that they did not necessarily get consensus for. You know, those are the places where the trust question comes in too. It's like, do they use the data in ways that I'm okay with, or random other person's okay with? Is that something where this seems like a reasonable trade-off to them? And once you lose that data, think in terms of, how one person, in my world of CISO stuff, we did insider and external threat, but also we looked at a person from a whole person perspective. You're a person who has a job in a place or goes to school in a place, right? You have family in another place. You have friends in another place. You traveled to this other thing. You have history that did this thing back in this other place. All of those pieces of information can create attack vectors for you personally. When we have an AI model that has like person information, and I know that's a whole different piece of it, and it's a provenance question unto itself, but if you take the person piece out, what is the rest of the data layer, and does it have the same kind of accuracy? So those are kind of the questions that need to be addressed when we look at the governance question and the regulations around things. It's like, what does it mean to give people access to this information? Who is allowed to do it, under what circumstance, and who's giving that permission? Those are pieces that I think are really critical in that story.
Thank you, Arlette. By the way, to the desk over there, can we get the panel slide back on the screen, please? And back to you,
Shingai.
Shingai.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to. I don't want to lead the witness, but I just wanted to touch, like, when you're talking about agents, right? Then there's probably some implications of like chain of custody and the provenance for those agents. You have kind of a parent agent calling 20 other agents at the back end, the cybersecurity of each of those. So any challenges or call for action in that area, or any other you want to pick?
Yes, I'll start just by acknowledging that I actually right now I'm teaching a program called the AI Policy Compass for policy professionals through Mila, Quebec, the AI Institute in Canada. And it is that interdisciplinary approach of bringing policymakers together with machine learning scientists to wrestle to the ground what are the details of robust policy. And then more technically, to answer your question, I mean, there are, across that entire stack, there are risks and potential threats. So, there's no one approach. It's, what are you doing at the base layer? What are you doing at the infrastructure layer? What are you doing at the language model layer? What are you doing at the agent layer, at the deployment layer, at the training layer? And then in the interfaces when users are interacting with the tool. So, all of that becomes part of, in my view, a governance approach, where you have to have policies in place at a company organizational level that deal with that. What's your collection, retention, use, disclosure, and deletion policy of how you treat your data, because there's no AI without data. So as part of the governance framework, really understanding at all those different layers of the stack, what is the governance framework to deal with the potential threats and to have the mitigations in place for your data and for your agents.
Thank you, Shingai. Russ, who's using this stuff?
Everyone. So one of the things that I'm going to kind of piggyback of what Arlette spoke about is around data governance, right? And I think AI has opened up a brand new field of alt data, right? We all know alt data has been king going back to 2012 with people scraping out of stock information, utilizing the wealth of data on the internet. But what AI has allowed us to do is now go through unstructured documents that have been typically public records. So think about your mortgage deed, think about your building permits. All of these municipalities are, rightfully so, putting that out for public record. But traditionally, we've never been able to aggregate that data en masse. And that's what Artifacts is working on. We're working on municipal intelligence. We're aggregating this data. And I don't want to be the one saying that I'm the good guy, right? I trust myself saying with all of this data, because if I can do that, there are going to be actors in foreign nation states that can use that to identify folks who have remortgaged their information, identify trends. And I'm not saying that the data should not be public and that we shouldn't be using it, but let's think about the municipalities right now, right? The heart of personal information. We can have these top-down approaches around AI governance and data governance, but to the implementation is going to be at the municipal level, which we know are often understaffed and underfunded. So how do we grapple with this wild west of lack of data governance, where in some cases, I think I've even remember a case, I think it was out of Illinois, where this was more of a cybersecurity issue. They had embedded social security numbers in some of their public documents that were not redacted. So think about the scale that allows AI to allow us to aggregate information. And again, I don't want to be someone raising the red flag, because I really fundamentally believe that this is information that should be democratized, it should be accessible, but we need to have the ability to have breadcrumbs to understand, where is this data coming from? Was it ethically sourced? Was it not ethically sourced? And that's going to come down to the municipalities and the local governments on how they implement this. And we don't have the support right now to educate the individuals en masse on what is generative AI. If you think of the average person who's thinking about what generative AI is, they're seeing the photo of Dolly and generated of Trump and Biden sharing a hot dog over a campfire and are getting freaked out. And rightfully so. There are certain ethical conversations we should have with that type. But there's a whole tier of data governance questions that are going to completely ignored at the municipal level, and that's what keeps me up at night. What if a foreign nation was able to identify a person in a school board, for example, that could be swept, that has multiple remortgages, that could be, a mal actor in some cases, right? Again, and this is not hyperbolic. This information is out there. It can be utilized, and we need to have a strategy at the local level on how we deal with the governments of data, so that we can adhere to things like the EU AI Act or any types of AI Act that comes down from the top. There has to be local buy-in.
Please.
I'm sorry, yeah, and I don't know how many of you track like threat models and like the threat landscape and things like that, but when you look at things like ransomware across, they're getting, I come from just north of Pittsburgh. Everybody can tell that already. I haven't given you anything new, right? But one of the water companies near my hometown got hacked, and it's like they couldn't verify the water. We talk about democratization of AI. One of the biggest barriers to democratization of AI is the financial barriers. And how do we get to the in-between states and take things out of the parentheses that I was talking about yesterday? Sorry.
No.
And then and get it to the places that really need it. It's like, there's places, honestly, every municipality needs it. Every municipality is underfunded. Some are just more underfunded than others. But to really build this capability so that we have some resilience in these core capabilities, and maybe we need to really think what it even is to, what privacy looks like in a different way, because so much information is out there. And it's like, what does it really mean, and how do we really protect people and make sure that they're not just, pawns in a, in this little scheme of things where people
Yeah,
should.
I just want to build on one thing you said that really kind of hit home for me.
Right.
If we're talking about democratization, we need to ensure that the town in Western Massachusetts has the same access to the AI that Boston, Massachusetts has or Washington, D.C. has. We need to prevent what I call digital feudalism from arising, where you will have certain areas that are able to leverage AI and create these little fiefdoms, right? And so we need to encourage the policy that we enact to help those communities that really do need some of this funding, some of this intellectual property. We need to be able to ensure that there is equitable AI policy, not from necessarily the individual size standpoint, but from the municipal standpoint, so that we do not have this development of digital feudalism.
Right. I'll just pick up and wrap up over here from my end. So thank you so much. You basically got to drill down, from the impact of policy to the impact of new architectures, given new agents coming up, and what that means to cybersecurity being across the stack in the new infrastructure and in the applications. The United Nations has something called the Kimberley Process, which is a set of 80 countries that is signatory for the trading of diamonds. Forget that it's the trading of diamonds. Some of this applies to trading of any kind across global routes. And there is anti-money laundering, there is money laundering, and there is terrorist financing from many of these supply chains, right? I cite that easily because this comes from the deployment of at least 2-3 of the platforms that I was describing earlier. And when you're talking about provenance, I'll just speak to that and then close it out. When you're talking about provenance, it's not just about the data, commonly the way we think about it, it's also very context specific. So provenance in the case of movement of goods has who has custody, at what time, in what time stamp, in what border, in what jurisdiction, because the insurance has an impact on that. And any kind of faults that happen, there's all kind of legal implications, not just the goods, the movement of commerce and goods. So the last wrap up I will leave is that to me, and hopefully to everybody, when we look at the connected science over here that we are trying to bring from policy, just 3 pillars that are present, or 4 pillars that are present over here. There's so much more width and depth that has not been addressed. To me, it's not just about AI. It's about a future and a world that is going to be increasingly autonomous. We've already seen that in vehicles. And I referred to provenance through blockchain and other things and IoT. They themselves don't give us automation. I wouldn't like to use the word automation, but I would like to use the word autonomous. So if we are going to get to that future where you no longer have to tell a parcel where to go, a container where to go, the container will tell you where it's going. Imagine that future. That's the future we want to imagine, right? Now think of the controls that are necessary from the orchestration, from the cybersecurity, from the policy standpoint, and then at the same time having the kill switch in a human hand, hopefully, right? Those are the implications I think we have to think about, not just that which is the good model right now and what are the different kind of models. All those are important building blocks, but that is the future I think we are building towards. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And you've been a very, very patient audience. Thank you.